everybody, Sarah here. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. How do I know if I'm ready to be in a relationship or to be married is a very common question, and we've received it more than once during panel discussions. And to be honest, it's quite subjective, to be honest. Being ready is not having everything together. There is no magic formula. There's no A plus B equals C and poof, the Lord is going to send you your spouse and you're magically ready. It doesn't work like that. You cannot earn a spouse. There's no, arrival point for marriage. We'll never fully be ready for marriage. And that's not to nullify preparing for marriage, but it's just really the reality of the matter. Just how expecting parents, prepare and take classes and buy all the products that are out there in reference to preparing for the baby, but nothing really ever prepares you like the real thing. So there are some general things that we can do to prepare for marriage, and that has obviously been the goal in this series. But there are maybe some specific things God needs to do in you. So ultimately the Lord deems you ready when the Lord deems you ready. So now that we know about marriage and how to prepare for marriage and dating as a believer, well, here's some general wisdom and things that you can examine in your life as to when you have a general idea of when you're ready to be in a relationship and ultimately married. So the first way you're on your way to being ready for a relationship and marriage is when you have a proper understanding of the gospel. If you were presented with the opportunity right now to share the gospel with somebody, would you be able to effectively articulate it to them? The word and the phrase, the gospel, gets thrown around so much in churches and in ministries, but there are so many people who don't actually know what the gospel is and cannot articulate it. Because the thing is, if you can't even explain the gospel to someone, if they asked you right now, then you definitely will not be able to live it out with another person. If you don't understand the gospel and the goal of marriage is to display the gospel, then you're going to be a broken mirror and enter into marriage for selfish reasons. This is the number one thing in ensuring you're on your way to being ready and prepared for marriage. If you truly realize that you couldn't share the gospel with somebody, then you really need to get into the Word of God for yourself and to seek to understand it. Not just so you can go get you a spouse and get married, but so you can effectively make disciples. So, point number 2, you're on your way to being ready for marriage when marriage is no longer an idol for you. How bad do you want to get married? Do you want it more than God? Has the desire for marriage turned into a demand? Because the thing is, when you demand something, you're saying that you have to have it. It's a necessity for you. Just how we have to have oxygen in order to survive. If you don't have it, you're going to die, right? And that's really how so many of us have viewed marriage. We have bought into our culture's lie that marriage is the end-all be-all and that it's necessary to have a successful life. Because some of us would end up getting married and making our spouse our God. We would put unrealistic God-sized expectations on them and then get mad when they don't live up to it. Because the thing is, another human cannot complete you. And I talked about this in the Becoming Whole Before I Do video, and I encourage you guys to go look at it. But the thing is, if marriage is not an idol for you, then you're in a much better position to display the gospel and to be a better spouse, which takes me to my third point. You're on your way to being ready for marriage when you're ready to be a spouse. So many people want to get married, but are you ready to die to yourself every day, to be selfless, to have children, to share your personal space with somebody, to exercise patience on a whole nother level, to compromise, to be vulnerable, to submit, to love like Christ loved the church, etc. The thing is, are you ready to take on the role and responsibility of a wife or a husband and eventually a parent? And let me just put this out there. Just because you're taking birth control does not mean that you're not going to get pregnant. And I'm just going to leave that right there because that's a whole nother video. But this really raises the question, how are you treating the people that are already in your life? Are you kind to them? Are you exercising patience and selflessness and self-control? The thing is, you won't magically become these things because you're married. How you practice in singleness is how you're going to perform in marriage. The last thing that I want to look at is more of a question. What does your community have to say? Does your community believe that you're mature enough, spiritually and otherwise, to be in a relationship and ultimately married? Do they truly believe that you can handle and take on the role and responsibility of a spouse and parent? If they advise against you entering into a relationship right now, then you need to take heed. These people are here to help you. And if they see that there are huge red flags in the other person, or that there are still things in your life that you need to work on and it's just not quite time, then you need to listen. You have to remember that there is protection in community, like we talked about before, and that they love you and that they have your best interest in mind. And while I'm talking about community, I want to encourage you guys to surround yourselves with godly marriages if you desire marriage, because you cannot imitate something that you're never around. So I really hope this video causes you guys to examine yourself and gives you ways to see how you can prepare for marriage and some ways to tell if you're ready. So stay tuned for next week's video where Sig and Youre Nichols are going to talk about healing after a breakup. Grace and peace.